Our final panel of the day is sponsored by Honigman and C.E. Gleason Constructors Incorporated. Our first panelist is Dennis Bernard of the Bernard Financial Group. He's the founder and president. Over the last 33 years, Mr. Bernard has specialized in both debt and equity placement with commercial lenders and institutional joint venture participants. He's done more than 1,000 transactions in his career, totaling more than $24.6 billion. This is the money man, Dennis Bernard. Next up is Emily D'Agostini Cunith.
It's all in the trunk of my car, so everybody wants to come out.
Emily is an attorney and principal at D'Agostini Companies. They have been in business for more than 50 years in a variety of privately held real estate developments and serves as a property manager. She oversees all in-house legal and accounting functions with an emphasis on family office, estate and income tax planning, leasing, purchase and disposition, joint ventures, condo work, property management. She does just about everything for the family. Emily D'Agostini Cunith. Charles Gleason II, C.E. Gleason Constructors Incorporated, President and CEO, headquartered here in Troy, Michigan, with offices in Austin, Texas, Charlotte, North Carolina, and Delray Beach, Florida. Gleason Constructors specializes in industrial, commercial, retail, multifamily, and assisted living facilities, and has built more than 40 million square feet since 1990. Charles, nice to see you. Dalen Handa is the founding attorney and co-managing partner at Hanna and Jarbo, a full-service Michigan law firm specializing in commercial debt collection, landlord-tenant matters, and other business services. That's a debt collector. Kidding.
He's not collectible.
He's very collectible. And Dalen is also developing some interesting projects in downtown Pontiac, which I'm sure we'll talk about today. And Doug Kellen is a real estate attorney who counsels clients in all aspects of real estate acquisition, sale, development, construction, leasing, and financing. He represents developers and operators from a variety of industries, including office and industrial. Finally, our last panelist is Fadi Nassar of the Nassar Company's president and CEO. He spent more than 25 years in program, design, and construction of major projects, including over 15 years leading and managing projects with alternative delivery methods specific to public-private partnerships. We're excited to have Fadi Nassar join us. And finally, our moderator for this final session today is a dear friend from WJR, Mr. Kevin Dietz. I'll let you take it from here, Kevin.
I know what you're thinking. WJR 760 AM. You're thinking they still have AM radio. What? So when you go back to your cars, unplug your streaming service and turn off your podcasts and try and find that AM dial on your radio. See if you can find it. If you locate it, dial it down to 760 AM. We have a little show from 9 to noon every day after Paul W. Smith and before Dan Bongino. So check it out. We'll try and entertain you. We got a great panel here today. It looks like we could probably have a basketball game. We got enough people. This is a good crowd. I wanted to get started really just talking a little bit about the pandemic. It's so odd to see everybody in person. We did this at the Mackinac conference, and it's just like, whoa, people, this is cool. But I think about your businesses and what a disruptance the pandemic had to be. And I wonder what kind of pivots you had to make, and as we move out of it, what worked and what didn't work. And I guess we'll start with you, Dennis.
Well, first I'm going to start with I wore my special socks for today. In case you can't read it, it says, "I'm not going to lie, I just make shit up." So those are my panel presentation socks. All right. We're Michigan's largest commercial banking group. We put about $1 billion to $1.5 billion out every year. What happened when we hit the pandemic? We stopped lending, of course, and immediately looked to our servicing of $4 to $5 billion of loans. And we tried to work with all of our lenders and all of our borrowers of who needed assistance. And Kevin talked about it earlier, unlike the Great Recession in 2008 through 10, that was when our financial institutions were in trouble. This time around, when the pandemic hit, we never had more liquidity in our financial institutions. They were healthy. We had money. Borrowers had equity. So we were able to solve a lot of problems. Short-term modifications for retailers, 6 months, 9 months, IO. And the lenders this time around were a lot more proactive. They weren't looking to take back the properties. Nobody knew how long this would take. So we spent a great deal of time. We spent 6 months doing a lot of workouts, short-term modifications. And that really then, as we started to come out of the pandemic, helped because a lot of lenders saw a lot of borrowers step up and say, I don't need a lot of help, I need a little help, what can I do? And that a lot of the borrowers were able to prove that they really were committed to their real estate, to evolving and product type during when we started to come out of the pandemic. And now we're seeing those relationships that they built with our lenders, they're now able to, as we move forward into more inflationary stage and some trickier underwriting, they're getting consideration from lenders. So it was a great opportunity to help our clients build relationships with lenders on a two-way street. So it actually, in the end, became productive. That and I learned how to use Zoom.
Emily, what did you guys come through and where are you headed?
So I just want to say I know what you're thinking. Who allowed this very young woman to sit on a panel with this distinguished group of gentlemen? I'm sitting next to the funny guy, so I had to try, right? So I'd say our biggest adjustment to COVID is happening now. Why is that? Let's think about it. The Fed, in response to the pandemic, the government injected 25% of GDP in basically monetary and fiscal stimulus into our economy. And let's compare that to the Great Recession, where they injected 8%. What is that causing? It's causing an absolute shutdown of production with workers and workforce for almost a year, yet demand is still extremely high because of this influx of brand new money. So you have high demand, extremely low supply for a long period of time. You have China that's still shut down, and oh, by the way, we're gonna have a war as well, and cut production of oil. So the problem is, we can't get what we need to build buildings. We can't get what we need to produce, and so it's been an extreme adjustment. And I'm sure Mr. Gleason here has a lot to say about that. That's been our biggest problem, our biggest adjustment. Thankfully, we are highly focused on industrial real estate, so our industrial tenants were very strong. We didn't have a ton of default or instance of turmoil to deal with, so we were lucky in that.
Charles, does that?
I can tell you that, like everybody, the pandemic, the virus, all the different names that went around, it created what was ultimate chaos. No one knew what to do. As a company, quite frankly, I worked too damn hard for this company and built this company from nothing. So as a collaborative group, we rolled up our sleeves and thought about what to do. There was all kinds of restrictions. You couldn't go to the office. You couldn't do that. Well, sometimes it's good to know people, and I got our company vaccinated. That was the first thing I did. I got everybody vaccinated who wanted to become vaccinated. Those that chose not to, they stayed home and worked from home. But I can tell you that it brought about a whole different meaning of being collaborative as a group, of rolling your sleeves up, from a secretary, administrative, project managers, estimators. We all worked together to get us through this. We were owed $45 million when the world shut down. 18.5 from one of my largest clients, LA Fitness. How did we do it? What did we do? We rolled up our sleeves. We worked together. And that was the key. You find out who your friends are. You find out who your friends are not. Those are particular times when you do more and create a relationship in life that builds through business and personal, and it's been phenomenal. And then, quite frankly, me, I'm still a Lotus lover of Lotus 1, 2, 3. here it is now. We went on to virtual Zoom meetings, okay? I still can't operate the damn things, but that's why I have the younger generations over there helping me, and that's been something it's been great and positive, but I'm a firm believer of getting in front of somebody, so that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, the collection attorney in me just really wants to know how much of that $45 million is still outstanding.
We got it all, actually.
got
We
it all.
really
That's
did.
Too bad. All right.
I promise
if
you
any of
that.
the checks bounce, you know who to call.
Sorry.
That's all right. There will be more.
You'll be going home now.
Could you repeat the question? I'm number 4 on the line. I'm sorry.
We're talking about the pandemic and what your organization went through and where you're headed now.
Well, on the real estate side of things, I hate to say it because I know a lot of people suffered through the pandemic and people are still suffering and lost loved ones. But that aside, from a financial perspective, I'd say COVID has probably been one of the better things to happen to me on the real estate side of things. We have 6 properties, mostly office. Our office is small footprint, executive style, shared office style, WeWork, or whatever you want to call it. And what we noticed was as people were coming down off $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 or 40,000 square foot footprints in bigger properties, they're looking to downsize. Either they're telling their people go home and work from home, to which a lot of those people say, all right, I'd rather just rent a small office and start my own thing or whatever it may be. So we did really well with that. It actually changed the trajectory of where I was going with office space, really, in a big way, because now instead of looking at a 50,000 square foot building and seeing 50,000 square feet, I'm seeing that divided by 200 square foot offices and some conference rooms and, the more giga economy business model. So for us, it was actually really, really changing in a good way.
All right, Doug?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I wasn't really practicing in 2008, 2007, 2009 is when I had just started. And so a lot of my older peers in my firm had been through a severe downturn, and I had not yet in my professional career. And so, we got a flood of calls when this started, which was breaking back out everyone's loan documents and everyone's lease and reviewing the terms really carefully to see what situations applied and what situations did not apply. So on the leasing side, everyone wants to know if they could stop paying rent, if they could use a shutdown, if force majeure clause, if they can get out of things in that way. And then, also people are looking at, you're getting a PPP loan and I have to apply it somewhere, and what can I apply it to? But everyone had us break out the bank documents as well. And so I feel like it was unique in the circumstance that everyone was very cooperative, which is kind of, I think everyone understood the situation, which I think was unique. So most of the landlords that we represented were giving forbearance on, or rent relief on a lot of projects, and the ones that were adequately capitalized and maybe had good relationships with their lenders and maybe got some sort of forbearance there. But there was a lot of breaking back out of all the things that we are concerned about as an attorney that actually applied in this instance. So that was kind of the focus and what I lived through. But the other side of it was rates got so low that everyone with loans was seeking debt, and it just spurned this insane amount of activity as rates started dropping. People's leases are in places, cap rates are being driven down, and basically people can afford to pay more, and people started paying more. So we went through kind of like, after it got settled down a little bit, we just saw a complete explosion for the past year and a half, where it just felt like we were on a dead sprint with everyone just spurning tons of activity.
Fadi?
I wore boring socks. Nothing on my socks, but
I got those in the trunk too.
Okay, cool. So the interesting thing with the pandemic was most of what's in our portfolio is over 150,000 square feet. Our typical tenant is a publicly traded tenant that has a multi-billion-dollar multinational net worth, if you will. And it was funny because my largest tenant contacted me and asked me for a lease forbearance. And obviously the question was no, right? So we didn't have any interruption in our rent roll. And the attorney in Dalen said it best. He said, there were some very unfortunate parts of the pandemic. However, we saw a lot of opportunity. And prior to the pandemic, most of what we did was primarily in the office, industrial, high-tech sector. So we decided, because of the construction costs and because of the chain supply issues and all of that, to diversify our portfolio. And we started to focus more heavily on, and this isn't necessarily in this sector, but we started to focus on some other sectors like the affordable housing sector. And we found that to be very opportunistic. And as a matter of fact, today we have about 1,000 units in our pipeline in the affordable housing sector. We started to look at some office buildings and try to rethink some of those office buildings and repurpose some of those office buildings. And we're doing that by way of conversion into apartments. We looked at industrial buildings that were necessarily not in the best locations and rezoned some of those for special uses and repurposed those. So the pandemic for us was really an eye-opener, and it was an opportunity.
Everybody's getting crushed by inflation with gas prices, cost of goods. It was supposed to be transitory. It's obviously here to stick around for a while. Any of you particularly impacted by that? What are you doing about it? Do you pass it off? Do you eat it? What? Anybody hit especially hard by inflation and cost of goods?
Well, I'll speak as a general contractor, construction manager. Your relationships, your long-term relationships, you roll the sleeves up and you try to work together. It's real easy to pass those costs off to an owner. But when you have a long-standing relationship, you work together. You don't work together, it doesn't work for anybody. Construction costs, material costs, since 2019, which is a perfect example of a question, is that when pandemic hit, we had projects that were already in the ground, ready to start, 7, 8 different projects. Material prices that we were shut down, force majeure, developers fighting against the tenants. Me as the contractor, I'm caught in the middle doing both. One working for the landlord, another contract working for the tenant. We're shut down. I've got materials ordered. Nope, shut that down. Well, it's really difficult to tell Volcraft, who's one of the largest joist and decking supplier, hey, I can't use that anymore. Well, there's a lot of monies and fights that you kind of went through and fought for what it would be. But the material prices went up 25 to 30%. Cap that with collectively with the labor. Labor went up 5 to 7%. So now you're looking at somewhere close to 37% of cost increases from 2019 to 21, now to 22. And what do you have to do then? You got to think outside the box. Think outside the box. So joists, now you had Amazon that had a complete monopoly on all the joists and decking throughout the country. I mean, you couldn't get them from Can-Am or anybody. They had it, and you couldn't get it, period. They weren't taking any orders. So then you start thinking outside the box. Instead of doing manufacturing truss, you use cold form truss that you literally manufactured in a warehouse here. Got them approved and engineered and inspected. Roofing cost, you still can't get insulation. Even now you can't even get the 60 mil membranes. You got HVAC suppliers that aren't giving orders or taking orders. Lennox, they're not taking any orders for HVAC units until 2023. And we're not even halfway there yet. Okay? So you had to think outside the box, and then you also think about what market that you're in. We've done a ton of retail. We've built 32 million square feet of retail since 1990. That's a lot. Retail, the brick and mortar, took a dive. You couldn't go out. What was happening? You had Amazon now in the family household taking orders, okay? When that happened, we knew there'd be other spinoffs, so we dove ourselves right into the industrial market, which we had been involved with over the years, but that became a prime target. And we're national, building cross-dock facilities and distribution facilities because that's where the market is. So that's kind of what we had to do.
To piggyback off of what Charles said. For the first time in our 50-plus year history, my dad, Gene, signed a contract for a roof on an 80,000 square foot facility where the price was unnamed. And basically what the contract said was, you get your price when the material's delivered to the site. And if any of you know my dad, he's a pretty careful spender. And he you know, we had to do it. Either that or you don't build a building. So I'd like to take a show of hands. Who feels like the inflation rate is much higher than 8%? I think so too. I think that the number that's published is skewed. They don't consider home prices in the national published inflation rate. They use a number instead, and you may. It's called the owner's equivalent rent number. So what they poll is what homeowners think their home would rent for. And that is the substitute for home prices, and that is the number that is computed into the inflation rate. So we all know what's happened with home prices. I think the number, the 8% number is really 25 to 30%. That's what we're experiencing in the construction industry anyway. So I think inflation is a problem for everyone in this room. I think it's a hit. It's regressive. It hurts the poor and the middle class more than anyone, and that's not good for not good for the country. So I am very concerned.
Following up on that, first of all, I guess there are attractive nerds in the room. They don't look like me all the time. But yeah, when you're quoting those statistics on inflation, those really aren't true statistics. Inflation is hitting my world in two different ways, both on the current ownership side and on the development side. How's it hurting on the ownership side? You have a fixed rate mortgage. You have your, if it's not multifamily, which you get to reset your rents every year, and if it's office and industrial, which this panel's on, you have a lot of long-term, anywhere from 1, 2, 3, or 10 or 15-year leases, and in a lot of cases, those aren't triple net if it's not a single tenant. So you're stuck with base year stops and offices, and there's only so much expense you can pass along. So what we're seeing is cash flow, because your income's only going up because inflation was low. The bumps are very low in the leases, if at all, because those were part of what was going away the last few years. But your expenses are going up, and your ability in your modified leases aren't there to recapture all your expenses. So you're seeing a decrease or a falling of your NOI, both your cash flow, and that's going to affect your ability to refinance during the life of those leases that you thought were secure. The flip side, so that's for the current owner. The flip side, again, coming to office industrial, a lot of the people up here, you know, I know Emily does a lot of these, they do build-to-suits. And as she's talking about, you sign that 10-year lease, you sign that 15-year lease, you're locked into your income stream, and now you're no longer locked into your expense stream of what it's going to cost to develop. And that could be everything from all the materials that Charles talked about that are relevant that you don't know. Now suddenly, then when you finally deliver the product, you have a higher cost, you're going to have to put in more equity, because your debt isn't going to change, because that's still going to be based off the income of a lease that you may have signed a year or a year and a half earlier. And we're finding out that people are having trouble closing, or having to come back with more equity, or they're being crushed down on their returns. So we are seeing that, and the cycle is only picking up. We're just starting. So current owners are going to have stress for at least the next several years, and those, we got some great things under construction, whether we do a lot of affordable housing. We have several affordable housing transactions we finance through various different HUD, Freddie, Fannie properties right now. We're doing a lot. When they get their HAP contracts or Section 8 contracts, they have a fixed rent. They go convert the property. It's good for the community. It's good for the neighborhood. But suddenly, they can't finance themselves out because their costs went up 15, 20% to deliver the product on the HAP contract that they got 18 months ago. So we're going to see a lot of dislocation in development of things that have been announced, that are under construction, and that's forcing, we have a lot of equity and a lot of liquidity in the market. That's where inflation is hitting hard.
Emily, I know your dad well, and to say that Gene spends carefully is an understatement. I will say that for us, when we discovered what was happening in the market, we knew that we had to change the way we built our buildings, and we don't have the luxury of passing those costs on to someone else, because essentially we only build for ourselves. So we had to get really creative. And one of the things that we had to do, and I believe one of the other panelists earlier mentioned this, is we had to buy our materials in advance. And that was really one of the only ways that we could kind of set the price. So when it came to drywall or steel studs or wood studs or whatever it was, we had to buy it in advance, and we found that to be very helpful.
Michigan wants to become a top 10 state for economic growth and development. How can we get there? What do we need to do to make that happen? Doug, let's start with you.
Well, I think there's a lot of politicians here that are thinking about incentives, and I think a lot of people are thinking about incentives right now. I know certainly in the industrial space, we've seen incentives for battery makers and people that need to sign leases very quickly to then apply for their incentives. And I think people, we've said this all along about thinking outside of the box, but I think anyone's looking for the extra help that they can. And if you can attract people with great incentives to your communities, that's just, obviously that's going to spur a lot of growth, and it's very important. So I know we talked today, I talked with you about it, being in an opportunity zone. It's so critical right now for attracting money and deals. And so that's one thing. But right, so I think it comes back to incentives. It would be very helpful.
Dalen?
I think we screwed up many, many years ago, long before I was even old enough to be a part of it. So it's not my fault. But I think letting the
Be the solution.
Yeah, well, I think letting the car industry go away, and now you have more cars being built outside of the state than anywhere else. So Michigan has always been so car dependent. We don't have oceanfront real estate. We don't have nice weather year round. There's a lot of things that we don't have that other states do have and that can offer. And now they're offering what we were only good at for a certain point of time. And so and I hate to be pessimistic, but that's the truth. And you look at states like Texas, and you look at states on the West Coast that are building EV factories and things like that. I'm not a politician. I don't ever want to be a politician. But I would say our politicians need to figure it out and figure out how to attract those businesses, because if we don't, we're going to get stagnant, and then we're going to get to a point where the Sun Belt, everything from San Diego, speaking geographically, San Diego to Florida, that's where the future of this country is. So if we don't have something competitive to offer, most people don't want to live in a place. This is going to sound bad. I was born and raised in Michigan, but most people don't want to live in a place where it's 8 months of bad weather if there isn't something to make up for it, like good industry. And so I think we need to bring industry back. If we don't, everything trickles down from industry.
Charles, can we get there?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. I did some research with my team prior to coming up here, so I didn't look like I didn't really know what I was talking about. So I will tell you that I actually read an article that was from, Bloomberg article that stated Michigan, our state of Michigan, is the #1 industrial financial strength right now in the entire country. And I was I was astonished, to be honest with you, because I don't see it. Most of our work is all out of state doing industrial. And I don't want to get into the whole union, non-union issues and things of that nature, but there's got to be a little bit of give and take, what I spoke about earlier. And that's part of the problem. That's why you got the Intel down in Ohio. That's why you got the solar batteries and everything else being done in Indiana. The union the non-union, the right-to-work state, there's got to be some type of a compromise, okay? I've got many friends that work in the automotive, and the automotive, is just running down south. We've got more projects that we're working on down south than I ever did here in Michigan. So I think it's going to take a hell of a lot more than the politics and the bantering that goes on. So.
Emily?
So, I have a keen perspective on this. The state of Michigan has 530 million square feet of industrial currently. It's one of the largest industrial markets in the country, as you've said. We also have the most engineers per capita of any other state in the nation. So we kind of have a leg up. We have a lot of power and natural resources, and it's ours to lose. So we heard Joey Agri today say that it takes longer to build in Michigan. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Derek told a story earlier about developers going to other states. That story was a story I told him. I want to explain what happened. Ford Motor made a decision to focus its EV operations in what's called Blue Oval City in Memphis, Tennessee. And so, of course, we as a supplier to the automotive industry, we supply buildings to the suppliers of automotive. We are very interested in that prospect. After a few phone calls, we were contacted by the Tennessee Valley Authority, who is basically the source of all energy needs for the automotive industry in Tennessee. And the Tennessee Valley Authority, all we are is a supplier to these manufacturers. We're a nobody. What they care about is the actual users. But even so, we were taken around on a helicopter. We flew to 3 different states and saw all the available sites for manufacturing development in that area. Some of the sites, most of the sites, were owned by the Tennessee Valley Authority. It was indicated to us that they would give the sites to the developers who had users in hand. Now, I'm not suggesting that the state of Michigan should adopt such a policy of flying developers around, like that's insanity. But my point in this is the Tennessee Valley Authority had meetings set up with about 8 different municipalities. Helicopter landed, we met the mayor, we met the economic development director. Next city, next county, same thing. There is an absolute cohesive effort among the municipalities and the Tennessee Valley Authority, and the state government in attracting business. That is who we are competing against. That kind of effort and focus and concern and care is who the state of Michigan is competing against. I am not surprised in the least that Ford made that decision. However, they're going to have a really hard time staffing those plants. Their employee base is not as talented as the employee base we have in the state of Michigan. We have the talent here. It is ours to lose. And I think we really need to focus in and rejuvenate that effort. I really do. I think it's very important because I agree with you that manufacturing is the seed corn to all other economic growth.
Fadi, what does Michigan need to do to make it into the top 10 states?
Well, I just learned something because I don't really do anything outside of Southeast Michigan, so that's really interesting that they made that type of effort. But I can say that I believe that it boils down to incentives. When we're talking to a user, as we call it, we'll do build-to-suits or whatever for a tenant. So when we're talking to a tenant, they're concerned with incentives. And if they can't get the incentives that they need from the local municipality, from the state of Michigan, from the county, and they can get it from somewhere else, that's where they're going to go. So I think our leadership needs to look really hard at that. I think we've lost some really significant sized transactions to other states, and I think it boils down to leadership.
Dennis?
All great points, all really great points. But I think one of the things that came out when Jeff Bezos wasted all these cities across the country time when they were competing for Amazon too, my firm was part of the Dan Gilbert effort to put something together. And when we had a debriefing afterwards, where did we miss? The single biggest issue was we had the engineers, but we didn't have the others. Because after the 2008 Great Recession, we had a tremendous outflow of everything from skilled manual labor, and there's a big difference. Skilled manual labor is high-tech stuff now. This is really, involved, educated stuff. We had a tremendous loss of skilled tech, high-tech labor that left the state, and non-engineers and workers. So our firm does business all over the country. We see the same thing that Emily does. We see the difference in how there's developments that are much more cohesive with the municipalities and the developers and the whole process in other places. But what we really see is we are lacking, when these companies are looking around, their biggest concern that they're talking about with the developers is if we build here, and we've done work for we've financed properties that were like for Emily, they might be doing it for Ford or for GM or for whatever. And the biggest concern is when they bring their suppliers in, how are they going to build it on time, and staff it? So I think the incentives are good, but when I look around the country and see places that aren't having to put up incentives, what are they putting up? It's quality of life you talked about, Charles.
Sure.
It's weather, it's education, cheaper education, lots of community colleges, it's a lot of trade schools, and people want to live there because they're getting good jobs and a good living wage. And we have to get back to that. We kind of have a hole in our demographic populous base in Michigan. And we're not going to attract these nationals with all the incentives we throw at them. That's good for the cost of building it, but it's not good for their operational cost. And they look much further than the cost of developing. They look to their ongoing operational costs, and they see Michigan's lack of ability to staff. And that somehow we have to figure out how to handle.
We're down to our last 5 minutes. Does anyone have a question for anyone that they would like to ask? Go ahead.
I have more of a comment. So everyone's talking about how we can bring more industry into Michigan in general. You mentioned, Dennis, that on the coasts and elsewhere in the Sun Belt and stuff like that, they're paying people very well. The cost of living is also higher. I think it's important everyone in here keep in mind that if you want people to stay in Michigan, we also need to not only keep salaries high enough, right, but keep the cost of living affordable enough to match the salary that we're making. Because if you can make a lot in California, but cost of living super high, compare it here. As a student who's about to graduate, could possibly move out of the state, it's probably a good idea to keep those things in mind.
Your point is well taken, but California has its own issues, as we all know. They are actually having negative population growth right now. And so are some of the northern Atlantic coast states because of their high cost of living. But as we talk about the smile in the South, going through the South, they're offering up 10 months out of the year of recreation, of great weather. So people are willing to, and especially your generation, which is like 6 generations removed from me, but six generation, your generation is looking for more lifestyle at this time and willing to give up a little money, not a lot, but a little money to enjoy maybe a more fuller family or recreational lifestyle. So if we don't have the ability to offer that, we have to find other things. And that is the differential to make a better living.
I just wanted to piggyback off something. I'm sure Dennis has seen this too, but deregulation in certain states drives so much activity. And so, I mean, I know I'm speaking to a room of developers, so I'm sure everyone is in agreement on this, but if you go to Texas, I mean, I'm asking, is something licensed? Is there a zoning report? And the types of diligence, they just don't have that. and they seem to be doing fine. But so, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, those places are making it very easy to do business.
Alabama.
And yeah,
Mississippi.
and
Southern charm.
and right. And so, if you try to get into a community and you're pitching a project and it's just, becoming increasingly, there's problems, people are raising issues, you're not getting support from the city, there's one person on the committee that's holding out of this. It's not like that there. And I feel like the less, or the more we can reduce that here, I'm not really sure how to do that. I think a lot of people have a lot of ideas on how to do that, but people have been talking about it, for a long time. But this goes back a long time. But deregulation is such a critical part to spurring industry.
All right. I want to thank everybody for being here, and thank the panel especially. Learned a lot today. Thanks, Derek, for putting this all together, and a round of applause for our panel today.
We want to thank Kevin Dietz. We hope we all get mentioned tomorrow on your show.
Thank you. How about a round of applause for Kevin? Thank you very much. Okay, thank you so much again to DryMedic, our presenting sponsor. I hope you found today of value. You got to meet people that you can help build relationships with. If you didn't get a chance to meet the person that you absolutely needed to, just reach out to me after the event. I'll be happy to make that introduction to you. Just want to say thank you again to DryMedic, our presenting sponsor, gold sponsors. We'll be right here in the cocktail hour, sponsored by Nassar Companies from 4 to 5. Thank you very much. It was fun. Enjoy.
Thank you, Derek.